Welcome to Coach My Wellness, a weekly show dedicated to bringing you information about healthy habits and behaviors just for the health of it. Here's your hosts, Joanne and Tammy.
Hi, I'm Joanne Orshan.
And I'm Tammy St. Clair, and this is Just for the Health of It.
We're so glad to have you join us today. We were speaking this morning about realizing that it's about well-being and not necessarily so much about the weight. And the weight really will be an effect of having an improved mindset and taking better care of our bodies. And today what we'd like to talk about some more is enhancing your well-being. Thinking about that you're the one that's in charge and learning how a holistic approach to well-being can really help you to discover health, contentment, purpose, and connection.
Right. Going back to what we spoke about a little bit earlier, the 4-year-old on the inside, and having that responsibility to parent that 4-year-old. And I don't know about you, but there's plenty of times when the 4-year-old inside of me says, don't tell me what to do. I want to do it myself. And how many times have we seen that in kids as they're learning to do something? I do it myself.
Yeah.
And it's them learning how to be functional, learning the limits of their world and of themselves and their bodies. And then how many of them, when they break something or they do something they're not supposed to, I don't know, I didn't do it. So there's that conflict between I want the responsibility and I want to grow, but I also don't want the responsibility because if something happens that I'm not sure of, I don't know what those consequences are. And I think we go through that as adults as well. What do you think, Joanne?
Well, it's interesting. You brought something up for me that I think about when my kids were very small. And I had taken a parenting course. Don't laugh, but I really did. You know, we all think that we're going to know what to do as parents. And I felt pretty strong about punishment and discipline and changing those words from my vocabulary and raising our children a little bit different. And my husband and I went to a parent and child educating class, and I learned so much from that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was the mindset of having repercussions as consequences for our actions instead of irrelevant punishment. So I know that may sound a little odd how I can translate that into what we're talking about today, but let's dig a little bit into this and think about that. So I think about when my kids were small. One of my kids, we were at a friend's house, and all of a sudden, my keys with my car keys on it, and you know how expensive to replace those keys are, my keys just disappeared. Could not find those keys anywhere. We looked all over the place. And what happened was that my daughter wound up saying that my friend's child had taken my keys and threw them down the toilet, and there went my keys. True story.
Oh, no.
So one of the things that my girlfriend and I did was we set up this whole game plan for trying to correct this behavior. Now, she could have been punished, right? Mm-hmm. Which is something normal a lot of parents would do. She could have had certain privileges taken away from her and all that, but we decided to do something different. And what we did is we set up this crazy scenario where I set up a huge play date in my backyard for a whole bunch of kids from the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't take her daughter to the party because I said to her, your behavior in throwing my keys away is very distressing, and it's going to take me a lot of time in order to replace them. I have to replace the keys. It's going to be very costly. And although the kids today are going to be having a wonderful time in my backyard, I'm going to need your help in taking care of the responsibility of placing my keys. So I took her with me to the hardware store to get the keys replaced. I made sure that she did, a couple of errands for me, which helped me to pay back for what she had done, so on and so forth. The craziest part of this story was, in the end, she learned a valuable lesson of what it means to take someone else's property and damage it. But the irony was that it was my daughter who misplaced the keys, not her. Anyway, it's just a funny story, and I carry that with me because it's so much about thinking about the consequences of our behaviors and having them relate to what it really means instead of berating ourselves or talking negatively to ourselves. And the other story that comes to mind is that I'm a self-admitted popcorn addict, to the point where I used to live in Manhattan, and I would walk down 34th Street, and there was a movie theater there, and I would stop in because the smell of popcorn just lured me into the movie theater. Oh my goodness. And I remember doing all of these things that make absolutely no sense and then beating myself up for it. But what I used to do in relationship to my food intake was that I would starve myself all day long in knowing that I was going to have that big bucket of popcorn later in the day, and I was going to eat it all and be so sick to my stomach after doing it. But the worst part was that I starved myself all day. I mean, the whole mindset was just so out of whack, right? I'm sure many of you can relate to that.
I was just going to say, many of the people listening are seeing themselves in what you just said. Oh yeah, I don't eat all day, especially if I know I'm going out that night.
Right. So one of the things that we talk about now when I choose to go to a movie and if I choose to have a popcorn is exactly that word. It's choice. So I stay on my regimented eating plan, which is pretty healthy, and I focus on that, knowing that I'm going to have the popcorn that night, which is a choice to have. And perhaps what I'll do is drink some more water throughout the day to help me with the salt intake. Or maybe I will spend a little bit more time in movement on that day to help with the overabundance of the caloric intake. And then I eat normally for me. I have my popcorn. It's over. And I just get right back onto what I was doing. So when you have that mindset of incorporating and putting it all in, it really works.
It does, because it becomes just a part of what you do and not like this failure that just appeared out of nowhere. Because I think what happens a lot of times is we see, oh, I'm going to have the popcorn tonight. We don't eat during the day because we're going to do that, or we're going out to dinner. So we starve our bodies of regular nutrition, all the nutrients it needs, which does nothing but build up our hunger for real food that we then satisfy with that giant tub of popcorn in the movies at night, where if we'd have eaten our regular meals, planned about the popcorn, made the choice to have it, we could have had the small little bag that you get and been just as satisfied, because we would not be feeling hunger with the popcorn. We would just be feeling the desire to have the popcorn.
Right. It's so much about the emotion and being the boss of your own life. So the mindset of I want to be the boss of my health and wellness and quit delegating responsibility to others. I mean, how many times do we blame other people? I have so many clients that talk about, well, they're going out with the people from the office and they're having drinks after work. And all of a sudden, instead of just sticking to what they have set up for themselves for their own health and wellness plan, it's all the pressure from everybody else. Oh, just have another drink, or we're ordering appetizers, have this, have that. You're directing you to do something just to fit in. And I have to say, Tammy, there is something very empowering about saying no, thank you.
I think that's so true, Joanne. And having the peer pressure, you don't want people in your office to think you're a dud or you're boring. Whatever goes on in our heads when we go out with them. But if you think about it ahead of time, you can be the boss of you and still participate. I know you have tips, Joanne, when you're telling your clients things that they can do in going out. I have things that I tell my clients about drinking. If they really don't want to drink, having seltzer with lime. No one knows if there's not a clear alcohol in that glass with your seltzer and lime. Most people think that there's vodka or gin or something in there. No one knows. And then that gets you some extra fluid, and you get to be the boss. Your peers may be pressuring you to have more alcohol, and you can just say, set it up again, bartender, just the way you did the first time. Right? And no one knows unless they're watching what the bartender pours you. No one knows. And I know you've given some other
Well,
tips.
one of my biggest tips is that please everyone forgive me for saying this, but I lie. Whoops. What does that really mean? Sometimes I just don't want to get into the dialogue or have to explain myself. And unfortunately, there are many times when I just say no, thank you, and that doesn't cut it.
Right.
So specifically, when it comes to drinking alcohol, I personally don't have any interest there. It's irrelevant for me. But for those that struggle with that and don't want to be in the dialogue of having to explain themselves, I'll say to my client, what if you just tell your friends or the people you're with, thanks, but I'm taking some medication this week and I'm not able to have any alcohol.
That's a great idea.
That stops all the questions. I don't need to have to explain myself to anybody, but I do that sometimes just to move on in a quick way.
Well, I know in some of our listeners' brains, what's going to happen is they're like, oh, and then they're going to want to know, what am I taking medication for? That's when you get to look at that person and just give them that look that says, don't even ask the question because it's not their business. And
I love that.
And sometimes I talk a lot with my clients around setting boundaries, which goes into being the boss. If everybody's imposing on your boundaries, you're allowing them to dictate. You're giving your responsibility over to them. And so I reinforce with them, set your boundaries. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to not do? And stick to that. And sometimes if the things that you're not willing to do are too out there, they're too rigid, have considerations, but it still doesn't mean that you have to do what somebody else is asking you or pressuring you or telling you to do.
As we enhance our well-being, just remember, it's not just about that. It's really about health in general and how it's affected by many things, by the diet that we have, the activity that we do, sleep, how we manage emotions, how we manage stress. And I focus a lot on setting goals, whether it's through diet and nutrition or physical activity or sleep or thoughts and emotions and mastering stress reduction, how we set different goals in different areas and tackle which one that we want to focus on right now on a scale of 1 to 10, which is the most important thing to have us acknowledge and work on to improve our own health and wellness journey. And once we have one area that we tackle on, then we can move on to the next, because there are so many pieces of the puzzle that have to be put in place. And to do it all at once is just sometimes way too overwhelming for the average person.
You're right, Joanne. And I was just going to say that I think what happens is people don't know how to break it down. They just say, oh, my blood pressure's up and the doctor said I have to bring my blood pressure down. And oh, how am I going to do that? And he said I have to stop eating salt or I have to start doing this. And often that feels very overwhelming, like you said, because people don't have a support system. They don't have anyone that they can ask. And we addressed a couple of episodes ago, doctors don't have that much training either, other than telling you, go do this and expecting you to figure out how to do it.
Well, again, eating well or a better plan and I really actually don't like the word diet, but I'm using it in the sense right now.
It is the word diet.
I don't like the word diet, but in the context of diet is just being one part of well-being. right?
Yeah.
I mean, your food choices are connected to your environment, your relationship with others, culture, your feelings of personal security, and other aspects of well-being. There are many different pieces of the puzzle that incorporate health and wellness.
There are, and having something as simple as the neighborhood you live in impacting your food choices, because there are lots of neighborhoods that are food deserts. So there's not a grocery store nearby where you can get all the time fresh fruits and vegetables. So you really have to make a point to figure out, how do I get there? How do I figure this out so that I'm getting the fresh fruits and vegetables that I need, that my family needs, that's impacting our health?
You know, it's interesting. My daughter went to the University of Michigan, and I know that you are also from Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that my daughter told me quite a long time ago, and I was shocked by this, is that in Detroit specifically, I do not believe that there are any or only a few supermarkets.
That's correct. Here, right here in New York City, it's the same in certain neighborhoods. There are no supermarkets.
So what do people do in making choices for their food options?
So that's why so many people end up eating everything out of packages, because the closest thing around are little corner stores. And New York City actually started years ago a initiative to pay the little corner stores to have fresh fruits and vegetables, at least a small selection in their store. And then the city would reimburse them for whatever spoilage happened that they didn't sell fast enough. And so now these days you can go into a bodega, which is the little corner store, and you'll see at least apples and oranges, bananas sitting out on the counter that you'll see people pick up. They may also have their bag of Cheetos in their hand, but they'll have a piece of fruit as well. And I think about areas in Brooklyn where for blocks and blocks, there's not a store within walking distance. You have to have a car. Other areas of Brooklyn where it's more wealthy, there's a full-size grocery store within a 4 or 5 block walk. Not everywhere. I live in a part of Manhattan where I'm lucky. I have a small grocery store, but it's still a broad spectrum grocery store, 2 blocks away on one way. And I have a much bigger grocery store 5 or 6 blocks the other way. But one of those has only been there maybe 4 years, which meant those people had to walk 8 blocks down to this very small grocery store near where I live, and then figure out how they're getting all their groceries home.
That's really challenging. And I know that one of the things you and I have focused so much on is trying to support others and coaching them to help them to decipher where they are, both physically, emotionally, and to help them with their health and wellness goals. When you and I started coaching together several years ago, we had always talked about the plan of joining forces and working together so that we can have greater impact on our audience. And when we got together, one of the things that we decided to do as coaches was the name Coach My Wellness. It just made so much sense in how we do that to really help others figure out this massive puzzle of how to improve their health and well-being.
And part of that was we recognized that health is not just about one thing, like you said, and our wellness is, because it's so broad, we have to have people help us along the way.
Right. And we were so fortunate to be able to acquire the name Coach My Wellness.
Our heart is in aiding people to reach their health goals and their wellness goals. And sometimes we feel so isolated when we're trying to reach those goals, and we feel like we're alone. Maybe our family is not, they don't have the same issues we have. The doctor told us our blood pressure's up, our sugar numbers are up. but your family is not. There's nothing health-wise going on with them. And so you feel very isolated. And so that's why one reason Joanne and I started this and continue to pursue the idea of coaching together and coaching clients together so that our clients can figure out how they want to meet their health goal.
So what we do when we work with our clients is we help to create an actionable plan to help you achieve your well-being goal. It's really all about your goals and what you want for yourself. All of the information that you share with us is 100% confidential, and we keep that to heart because we're very passionate about what we do and wanting to make a difference to support you on your journey. So before you begin any lifestyle change or plan, remember that a successful goal is several different things. It means being flexible. So if you're not meeting your original goal, it doesn't mean that you failed. It just might mean that you need to modify your goal.
Or you just have to clarify it. Sometimes we say, oh, I want to lose 30 pounds. And we don't think about what that really means. Where Joanne and I come in is we help you figure out, well, if I want to lose 30 pounds, that's not going to happen by the end of June, by the time that wedding comes around. But we can help you set a reasonable goal. And maybe that's working to get 5 pounds a month. That's reasonable.
So it's being positive. It's working towards something. Could be building relationships. It could be greater movement in my life. And having that positive mindset instead of avoiding conflict. So therefore we do nothing.
And sometimes it's challenging you to simply get out into the park when the free exercise classes are there. There's a lot of people that do free movement things in the local parks and helping you to not feel so self-conscious and pushing you a little bit outside of your comfort zone so that you also are connecting with people who are also working on improving their health and well-being.
Right. So when we work with our clients on goal setting, they also come up with their own tasks or deadlines to help produce feelings of pride and accomplishment and of success. Something, again, as I always say, just monitor, measure, and control. But if you don't have a goal, how do you know where you're going, right? So you need to identify what your goals are.
And the adjust, I think, is the hard part when the goal is a big goal.
And of course, having your goals be harmonious. So if you're setting multiple goals, to make sure that they do not conflict with one another.
That can be a challenge sometimes because we want A, but we want it in timeline B. It's just not going to happen. Things don't work that way.
Right. It's, setting yourself up for success, not for failure. And how do we do that? It's all starts, I believe, in how we talk to ourselves. And sometimes as we are going through these health and wellness journeys, we might not be exactly where we want to be, but what we keep saying to ourselves in affirmations, in keeping accountable to ourselves, to our coach is, as they say, faking it till you make it. Just keep putting those positive thoughts back into your head, which again is much more productive than having negative thoughts being put into your head all day, such as berating yourself when you've gone off of some of the goals that you've set. Mm-hmm. It could be that it's about choice.
Sometimes I think the chatter in our brains is so persistent, though. And I know the last few days I've had some time to myself. And within that, I had a bit of space where I couldn't have my ear pods in and listening to something. There wasn't much going on around. And so I actually was sitting in silence. That was so disconcerting to me because it had been such a long time since I've just sat in silence.
Unplugged, right?
Unplugged, completely unplugged. And it took a good day for the chatter in my brain to begin to quiet down and shift away from what do I have to do? What am I missing? What deadline am I not meeting? Who do I have to call? Why did I take a bite of that? What's going on? Who have I not connected with lately? And to just unplug and say, listen, it's all going to be waiting for me when I get home. Just let the brain turn off. And that's a challenge. And that's what we do, right? We're coaches in wellness. And part of that is learning and teaching people it's going to be okay. Just turn off. And learning how to do that, it takes time. And this weekend was a great reminder that it takes time to step away.
So let me ask you a question, because as I'm listening to you, I totally understand this side of it, which is interesting because it's a different thought process that we have. But I know so many people who have been really alone and have had more time with themselves throughout this pandemic. And what they're really missing is the social support. So yes. I think it can really go either way, going from total isolation and having so much of yourself that it's opening up to, whether it's a trusted group of people or a valued individual, because I know that has really been shown to reduce the psychological and physiological consequences of stress and can also help to enhance immune function. So I think that both signs of that are really valid.
Yes, but it goes along with what's the dialogue in your head. Coming out of the pandemic, we're coming back into letting people back into our lives and sort of figuring out how much do we want to share ourselves because of so much been going on that we're also reevaluating who do we let back into our lives, how much do we share, and then as well as so much going on, we feel like we're overwhelmed with just stimuli bombarding our systems. And so no matter what, we're sensory engaged. Our bodies are on high alert in that fight or flight mode. And it's learning to take that and breathe and bring that autonomic nervous system back into a sense of balance. And part of that is engaging in a support system where people that are loved and trusted can support you, and learning to meet new people, putting yourself out there to gain new friendships and new relationships in maybe areas that you didn't even know you had an interest in before you got locked in your house or apartment for the last 2 years.
Right. And I love that because I know that throughout this period of time, one of the reevaluations I've had has been to evaluate the toxic people in my life and working to eliminate them because I know it does not benefit me in my own health and wellness journey. So thank you so much for sharing all of these thoughts with us today. I'm loving the dialogue that we're having, and we're going to continue with several more topics in this arena. We'd like to thank our audience for spending time with us today as we talked about being the boss of your own health and wellness and stop delegating those responsibilities to others. Once again, just remember to join us every Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Instagram for our Instagram live discussions. And that's your chance to interact with us and get your questions answered live. Again, we invite all of you to follow us on Instagram at CoachMyWellness_CMW. You can also find us on Facebook at Coach My Wellness. And please visit our website, CoachMyWellness.com. Subscribe to our site and sign up for our newsletter. And again, don't forget, we'll see you next week on 360 Talk Radio for Women, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Have a good week, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Coach My Wellness. For more information about healthy habits and behaviors, visit our website at CoachMyWellness.com and follow us on Instagram at CoachMyWellness_CMW for weekly live streams Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. We hope to see you there.